Good evening and welcome to the February 18th, 2015 meeting of the Gaithersburg Planning Commission. First up is the approval of our minutes from January 21st. And I guess I'll note that, Danny, you were out for that meeting, so you'll abstain from these minutes, right?
No, I was late.
Oh, you were? Okay.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, though.
Well, actually, I was looking at the minutes themselves, and it said the way it was picked up was that you weren't there, but that's fine.
I was 4 minutes late.
Cool. So noted.
Okay. So, in which case, please vote on the minutes. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes of the January 21, 2015 Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I guess we should amend the minutes to show that Danny was 4 minutes late.
Bold print.
Next up on the normal agenda will be record plats, and I guess we have none of those tonight.
No plats.
Okay. And then that takes us to our consent agenda, and there are 3 items on the consent agenda. First is AFP-6764 2015, final architecture for MI Homes, Blocks K and L, Crown Neighborhood 2 in the MXD zone. That's an amendment to final plan. The second item is AFP-6825 2015, elevations approval for KB Homes in Block L, Crown Neighborhood 2 in the MXD zone. That's an amendment to final plan. And the third one is AFP-6858-2015, elevations approval for MI Homes in Blocks K and H, Crown, Section N2, Neighborhood 2, in the MXD zone, and that's an amendment to final plan. And I'll just note that 2 of them, the second and third one, do have one condition recommended or included in the write-up from staff. Any questions on the consent agenda?
No.
Pretty straightforward.
For a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
Second and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. And just for the record, and for the large crowds assembled tonight, Joe Cortola is participating tonight, as not all regular commissioners are present. Just let the notes show that. Next up is recommendation to Mayor and City Council for MP-1-14, the 2009, can that be right, Environment and Sustainability Element, an amendment to the general plan. And presenting from staff is Rob Robinson. Good evening, Rob.
Good evening, Commissioners. The Environment and Sustainability Master Plan will serve as an informational and policy document to the Mayor and City Council, the Planning Commission, other boards and committees of the city, and the residents of Gaithersburg. This element is the final amendment of the 2009 Master Plan update. The element is an update to both the 2003 City of Gaithersburg Environment element and facets of the 2009 Water Resources element. The draft element was made available and first released on September 8, 2014. The Mayor and City Council and Planning Commission held a joint public hearing on November 17, 2014. Following the public hearing, a joint work session was conducted with the Council and the Commission on January 12, 2015. During the joint work session, staff presented the changes made to the public hearing draft element in response to comments received during the 60-day comment period and from the public hearing. During the joint work session, staff received guidance for an additional revision to add clarification language to one recommendation in the urban forestry chapter to include the words property owners. The revised complete draft reflecting these changes has been included and presented this evening as Exhibit 30. The Planning Commission record closed at 5 p.m. Friday, February 6, 2015. And with that, staff recommends to the Commission to approve Resolution PCR 1-15 and recommend adoption of MP 114, the Environment and Sustainability element, to the Mayor and City Council. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So, Rob, excellent job. I know it's been a long haul, and I went back through one more time and just sort of looked at some of the highlights, and it was really remarkable, all the good information. It's probably the most colorful section of the master plan this one. You got color charts and color charts.
Right.
And we all recognize that those are hard for you, Rob, to put in the charts.
You can tell this was a concerted effort with Diane McIntyre and Strider.
Just as an aside, the other night, I guess it was last night, the council met on an issue about stormwater management, and I'm just curious. I didn't get a chance to catch it all. I sort of like caught it in passing. Mm-hmm. What was that about, or how does that fit into
the discussion the other night was related to the water quality protection charge that you hear so often about, and staff had presented both the manual dealing with how that fee is calculated and seeking guidance from the council on what the fee structure and rate would be. And it is my understanding that It was left with some further guidance that staff has to do some more research, but they presented a number of options. But this
Okay,
is...
but no impact to the actual master plan element?
No,
on quality or-
once again, everything's sort of, synchronizing together with the
Okay.
discussions of stormwater management, just because it is an issue out front, but this is something separate.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
Just to add that,
Just comments.
I'm looking forward to this.
That's fine.
Sorry. Okay.
Fine.
I thought we were on the comments. Just a quick comment, it's just, I think this is going to be a great document to use going forward. It's really the main, task of this document is to give us the tools to discuss later issues. So not just planning and the details of planning implications, but any new legislation, any new rezoning, and any new sort of layout and regulation of larger planning issues too. So all the facts are here, and that gives us the ability to make wiser, smarter decisions, which is wonderful.
Yes, indeed.
I just wanted to echo what Commissioners Hopkins and Chairman Bauer said about the quality of the report, as well as the encompassing of all the comments that were made over the last several months from the Commission, from public, from the Council, and really appreciate all the hard work the staff has done on this, and look forward to utilizing it.
Thank you.
Sure, I really am, I'm now on a new committee with the state and with Planning Commissioners Association, and I plan to share this with them, because I think there's a lot of good things here that others in the state need to know that we're doing, and maybe take some information from it and use it for their own good. So I plan to share this.
Yeah. Take credit for writing it, too.
My name's on there.
Some of the graphs.
Anything else? No? All right, we're ready for a motion, I think. Yeah, again, Rob, great job. And I'll note, for whoever's making the motion, this is really a two-part, one motion, but
Yeah.
one is to approve a resolution.
Recommend.
For us to approve this amendment, or this, I guess it's the element itself,
Mhm.
and at the same time recommend adoption to the mayor and council. So, with that, is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve Resolution PCR 1-15 and recommend adoption of MP 1-14, the Environment and Sustainable Element, to the Mayor and City Council.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. All right. That takes us to a tree removal waiver. That's ENV-6841-2015. First Baptist Church of Gaithersburg at 200 West Diamond Avenue. Again, a tree removal variance request, and again, presenting from staff is Rob.
Good evening again. The applicant, on behalf of the First Baptist Church of Gaithersburg, submitted tree removal application Tree 7566-2015 on January 26, 2015. Upon staff review, it was noted that the proposed tree to be removed, a white oak, measured greater than 30 inches at diameter at breast height, or 4.5 feet, otherwise known as DBH. The subject tree measured at approximately 48 inches DBH. Under state law and our code, trees greater than 30-inch DBH require a variance for removal granted from either the Planning Commission or City Council under Section 22-12D. The applicant submitted all the required information, justification letter, things along those lines. Staff visited the site, and on the screen right now is just so everybody can locate on the site where the tree is. Staff visited the site and evaluated the subject tree and arborist report and concurs that the tree has greater than 60% dieback in the crown of the tree and decay, reflecting that the tree is in decline. The picture included with the background materials wasn't that good, so we went out subsequently, but after I submitted the package. So you can see clearly this tree, basically topped, only this coming off. You can see the rot at the base, and then from the other profile, even better with the light behind it. Under 2212D, findings are required, and the applicant submitted findings, and staff reviewed the findings and combined our notes. Number one is, we'll confer on the applicant a special privilege that would be denied to other applicants. Just to make note, the Planning Commission has granted previous variances for the removal of trees in similar condition, including previously on the subject property and at Watkins Mill Town Center. The second finding is arising from a condition relating to the land or building use either permitted or non-conforming on a neighboring property. As was shown on the map, this is insular to the site. The plan itself was basically adopted like around 1993. So this tree, has been there for 20-some years. It's natural age. will violate state water quality standards and cause measurable degradation in water quality. As you can see, it's on there. It's within a parking lot. There is no streams nearby. There is no floodplain. So that is not there. Basically, in conclusion, staff recommends that the Planning Commission make a motion to grant the requested variance for ENV 6841-2015, removal of a 48-inch white oak at 200 West Diamond Avenue, finding it in conformance with Section 2212 of the City Code, and based upon the findings presented in the staff report.
Very good. Any questions? Seems pretty straightforward. Hate to see it, but I know it's a natural progression sometimes with trees that either have been damaged or diseased, and you have to go through this, take it down. Do you know, and maybe you said this and I missed it, but part of this is replacing it or not necessarily, or it's not necessarily required?
We can, and I'd like to bring up something. In the staff report, I had said this does not count towards forest conservation. Going through subsequently some files, I came across an old forest conservation plan, and I was speaking with Trudy about this earlier. The difficulty comes, this was done in an era where they really didn't understand forest conservation. So at the point in time finding the plan, they had labeled this parking lot a tree save area, and identified even this tree as a specimen tree, and it was 48 inches, 20-some years ago, so this shows, this tree is just there. But subsequently, being able to track aerials over time, it's never maintained the tree save requirements. There's no easements listed. There's been actual further work done within the site. So the difficulty comes, and even looking at their chart and not knowing how they did it, but not really agreeing with the methodology that they did it. I mean, they're still over the state requirements. So I'm amenable. I still have to approve the tree removal permit, and I can place a condition on that permit to replant. But the question will be, do I replant in kind, and where do I site it on the site? The difficulty comes, as was announced to, known to me by the applicant, this center part they use almost as a de facto playground. So to put a tree in the center, let me go back to the original location. You can see now with the interior, I mean, even, yes, it's winter and it's dark, but there's nothing else. That shows the sign of kids playing. So I can have them replace in kind, but I really don't know, especially long-term speaking, what the benefits are going to be.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, just off the cuff, I'd sit here and recommend it because you guys have studied it in the course of the application. It was more of a question if that was a part of what you either had.
I've gone back and forth because the difficulty comes if they're going to plant, they're going to plant on the fringes. So thinking long term, eventually these will be hazards once again to the parked cars because it is on the border of a parking lot. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a bit tortured logic. Hazard to cars, hazard to people, but I think there is some uncovered. One of the main objectives of tree cover is to shield both ground from evaporation and asphalt from heat gain, right? So, almost no matter where it is on site, if there's not a tree there, another tree will help.
Okay.
So, I'd argue that your environmental, affairs group would argue that any tree cover is good tree cover, particularly when it covers a used, contained soil area where you're gathering water. And then also if it's up against asphalt, it's a no-brainer, right? You're shielding that asphalt in the hottest months of the year. But and I'm assuming that the large open area that's out towards 117 is actually a future pad site. Is that why that's really a fairly bare piece of the site?
This here?
Yeah. No, sorry.
Yeah, on the other side of the
out in
building.
front of the church. There's a
play area where they.
Yeah, there's a decent size, portion of the site that's really treeless. It's lawn area, which is not the best environmental answer, particularly for an institution to use.
Well, they do have a high school, a boys' high school there, so they utilize that front area for field
Right,
use.
great. Yeah. So
I'd be happy to work with the
appropriate
applicant.
future building
Yeah.
site or
On
something.
the permit, I'll be happy and possibly even get 2 to 1.
But I don't see a zoning impetus for it. If it meets the forest conservation and for new construction, then I certainly support bringing this dying tree down. I just would like the city to represent the best interests of the city, being that we have as much tree cover as possible. So
I agree.
All right.
it's conversation, not code.
It's good direction. Any other questions, comments?
No.
All right. Is this technically a public hearing? Should I at least announce if
No,
there's
it's just a...
okay, just a waiver. Very good.
Just a variance.
Any other questions? Staff recommends that we grant the waiver. So is there a motion, please?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we grant the requested variance for environmental 6841-2015, finding in conformance with section 2212 of the city code and based upon the findings presented in the staff report.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
No site plans on the agenda tonight, but we do have a discussion item, and Assistant City Attorney Frank Johnson is going to, I think, introduce that for us. Is that right?
I can. I know Trudy has also been working on it, so
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure which one wants to. Maybe you want to
I
do
can
an
start.
intro?
I can start.
So,
Why don't you
the
do
only
an
reason I
intro?
jumped you, I'm sorry, Trudy, because I think you brought it up at the last meeting that it was coming. I
Yes.
had that stuck in my head, so
No, that's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
Well, let me tell you that Frank did most of the work. So,
Okay.
Well-
so I give him all the credit. After the meeting, Frank put together this list, which was number one exhibit, and then I added a couple of things. And of course, the minutes just to remind you, but I think mainly we want to focus on exhibit number 3, and which kind of shows the existing rules with the suggested changes, and kind of start by going through section 1, see how far we get tonight, and kind of go through discussion about that, if that's...
I have 2 points of order, please, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
One is that on the memo that was, the memo was dated, I believe, in the memo itself, it says October 15, 2015. That should be 2014.
You're right. Sorry
And
about
the
that.
other point of order is that I was in attendance, and I noticed that my name was left off completely as an attendee at that meeting in the minutes, so I'm kind of like, wow, that kind of blew me away a little bit.
We'll have to see who approved those.
Yes, I realize that. I probably made the motion to approve or second it, but just realized that, so I wanted to make that point of order before we begin the proceedings.
Maybe you weren't there.
Oh, I was.
Which minutes are you talking? Because it says all commissioners were present, so what?
Yeah, but my name's not listed in
Yeah,
the...
the-
Oh, I
name
see,
is
because you're in
listed.
there, you're actually
Yeah,
from...
I made
Yeah,
a second.
Right, exactly.
Good catch.
Picky, picky.
Sorry.
The ghost of Bunny.
No, I was going to say,
Yeah, I was
Bunny's
gonna
not
say,
here.
All right, Judy, sorry to
Yeah, I didn't-
derail you there. What's,
Number 1?
Well, section 1, and also the overall comment at the beginning of that,
Yeah, that's good.
which was to add sections that weren't on it, that were on the kind of the template that the city attorney's office has prepared for people who don't have rules of procedure
Mhm.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I think, maybe I'm saying the obvious, but I know one of the overarching goals here is to make consistent the rules of procedure across all the boards and commissions, so that there's, enforceable and consistent from whatever procedural stuff you get.
To the extent feasible, there are, each commission has some parts that are unique for your work, but there are some general updates. Sometimes it's a matter of if we are referring to state law or city code, just make sure it's, some sites have changed, particularly with state law. We are incorporating references, not a large amount, but to some extent, the Public Information Act, but what's even more relevant, the Open Meetings Act, so that it's very clear, that's all part of our rules, that if there had to be a closed meeting, that we'd follow the process. And there are a couple of changes or suggestions, partly based, the Board of Appeals just did an update to their rules, I guess about a year or two ago. There are a couple of provisions by comparison that we might be able to use. Why reinvent the wheel? And as Trudy had mentioned, we did do some templates for other commissions, and there are certain provisions that, again, may be helpful. Doesn't mean just because that's the template that it's got to be part of it, but in some cases, if it makes a difference, if it's helpful to be in there, that's why it's there. So are we going to go from the one that adds it into the
Yes,
rules
yes.
directly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
So one of the things that was brought up was having a purpose of the commission. And so I just pulled from what we have actually on the website, because that's very much covers
Yeah.
what the planning commission did. And if you all have any additions, corrections?
Yeah, the only thing that struck me about that was when I was reading through that there's a, I think it comes up later, where did I see it? It's the purpose, but it's also legislated by, the state passes it to the local jurisdictions to take the land use and zoning authority, and so it's directed that there be a planning, and that's the fundamental purpose, is it's actually legislated or it's mandated.
Yeah, there is, and there's a general reference to, actually, it's the Maryland Land Use Code.
Right, but that's cryptic if you don't know what that means.
Right,
I'm
I
just saying,
understand.
in the sentence, it might be that it's established or it's compelled by, whatever the right
That,
language is.
and that was just a note. That's a note that we put in, so that's a good point.
Just as a stand-up.
Just as
Yeah.
we said, we need to refer to the Maryland state.
Oh, I see what you mean, okay.
But when you look at the state thing, it basically says have a planning commission.
Right.
It's pretty,
No, there's more to it. I mean, they have basically that 5-6 point sort of, 44B, right? That really just discusses this 5 or 6 basic points
Yeah.
that a planning commission is supposed to hit. And I think they're very revealing, the bay being one of the more, pieces, and then economic, as well as, sustainability. I think it's a very good thing to reference in a clear way. I don't know how you do that without adding 5 sentences, but.
That can be done, that certainly makes some sense. Now, again, as we go through, these suggestions are not necessarily, and it's not a wordsmithing, these aren't the words necessarily we use. Really, the idea is to get your thoughts, any future, once we get to the point of drafting something, of course, then we might get into, well, let's use this word or this. This is a bit more conceptual, and as we're going through, just because there may be a subsection or something that's not noted, because again, this is based on our October meeting when you were here, Mr. Kaufman, but also just from staff discussion as well as we're going through. So there might be more that we'd want to add.
Yeah, although I just hear my perspective, because things have run relatively smoothly,
Right.
we haven't been challenged on much. I'm not inviting it, frankly, but there haven't been issues where the rules of procedure have been either deficient or unclear or whatever. I'm not looking for trouble, but I appreciate the fact you're looking for ways to draw it into consistency with the others or some of the legal points.
And generally, that's, my approach has been, because there aren't real problems that I've seen over the last year or year and a half that I've been attending. So these do tend to be more updates and, is there a section that might be helpful? That's
good.
I think that's an accurate way of putting
these
it.
is really sort of, the sort of legalese, mishmashing. I thought there were some things in here like being able to hold, meetings for information elsewhere and things like that were really, I thought, a great way to clarify not just the intent of what we're supposed to be doing up here or anywhere, but actually gives us a clear direction that we can go and gather information as a group,
Right.
with notice and whatever else, at other spots, in other places.
So,
We don't even know what they are yet.
yeah.
So.
And I had a brief conversation with Mr. Kaufman, and we're thinking about the Maryland Planning Association. Maybe we could look at their rules of procedure or look at other documents to see if there's something we could incorporate.
Sure,
and
certainly.
compare. So that's something we could do, and I could help you with.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and that might be helpful just to see, are there any provisions that they would suggest?
Right.
If, I'm sure they kind of look more locally at what we've used and what's been suggested, but certainly can see if there is some additional ideas there as well.
Okay.
And certainly, yes, feel free to volunteer on that, because if you see something, this is a pretty good set of rules, so it shouldn't be that hard also to
Right.
add something in
Right.
without a major
And
problem.
we just had a meeting on January 30th, and I got a bunch of stuff. It's funny, I was looking at it this evening, and I'll just grab it and maybe kind
Sure.
of share with you.
Okay,
Okay.
That'd be great.
Although, again, this is pretty clear language, pretty simple language. I don't think, as Matt had brought up, I don't think we need to keep adding more legalese to this to muddy the waters, so.
No, that wasn't the point. It was just to, look at comparisons and see if there's something else we can consider, not to, don't want to muddy.
You're going to approach it like an
Yeah.
architect and keep making changes with that. I mean, that's another approach to the legalese mishmash has been referred to.
There we
We have
go.
our own city attorneys. You can't go by the hour.
Let's focus. All right, keep going. Where to next?
I think we're at 1.1A.
Yeah,
Thanks.
1.1, and Frank had suggested, to add the phrase, you can hold conferences, but we still have to, we're subject to the prohibitions of ex parte communications.
And that can just be a brief reference. It's not that there's been a problem, but again, just to clarify.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's a clean statement,
Let
just.
me ask a question, and not trying to be too esoteric, but, if I see someone in a grocery store, it's just, one of my colleagues in a grocery store, that's not, considered an ex parte communication. Or is it, is it 3 people? Is it 2? What is it? I've always wondered about that.
Ex parte is really a party that would come before the commission and you have a conversation about their case.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Then the problem is that you are then deciding that case,
Okay.
having to decide on whether their application, petition, or whatever. That then becomes ex parte because then it's not a matter of the decision necessarily being made on the record or
Mhm.
based on what's presented.
Okay.
Then you've got some side conversation. It might be entirely valid, but that's your ex parte problem.
Okay.
Seeing somebody in the grocery store or something like that generally should not raise the issue, but that can be where you'd say, they may not be so worried about the ex parte thing. That can be where you say, okay, I'm not allowed to talk to you about the plan at all, and you just have to be careful about
Yeah,
that.
I saw one of my former commissioners, who's since, passed, but we were in the grocery store and someone came and said, "You all can't be together." I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of a stretch. Anyway, all right.
And that's kind of an open meetings thing where if you have a quorum getting together, sometimes the city council faces that.
Mm-hmm.
But any group that does, if it's just an informal invite, it shouldn't be an issue. But if it's something where we know in advance a quorum is going to be in attendance
Right.
somewhere, even if you're not really participating, generally, we'd want to at least put it out there to say this is an invite. As I say, it's much more relevant for the city council, but
Mm-hmm.
that's really what you're referencing there. So.
All right. Very good. Where do you want to go next? Posting requirements, I think that's okay. Although, it's interesting. I would be careful
It's a
not
pretty minor change.
to reiterate stuff that's in the zoning ordinance, though. And I would be nervous about that. I don't want to. So if it's stuff about posting, which is captured, isn't all of the posting requirements in the?
Yeah, this is
But you wanna-
this is very repetitive of what's in the code.
Yeah, it already
Posting,
is.
Yeah.
And simply noting that this is as required by the city code may help, and that may not be as critical for you as somebody else who may be looking at the rules to say, well, are these rules even consistent? That
Okay.
answers the question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, that's
good
a
enough.
good point because it did come up in one of our recent
Right.
rulings.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
You are correct.
We did spend the last 2 years, though, trying to eliminate a lot of these repetitions, though, right? So there's some validity to not increasing them at the very least.
Right.
And then 1.3, we do need to modify, because at the time when these were adopted, we used to send out the whole agenda
Yeah.
to people. Now we just send
Yeah.
out postcards that show the agenda item that's within the abutting and confronting properties. So that needs to be modified, and it does actually say that it will be mailed to all abutting and confronting properties related to the, and and so on, to citizens associations, homeowners associations. So every mailing, postcard mailing we go, the HOAs get all the mailings of all the plans that are going on. So they know what's going on down the street and what's going on across the city. So, I think we can, again, clean this up a little bit and then also reference the city code.
Okay.
Just general.
All right. Here's your open meetings, section 1.4 is your open meetings reference.
And that's a general information section if you're looking at 1.4, and that's just, most of the rules do indicate where the general location is for the meetings. It's not a requirement that they always be there, but usual location. Again, fairly basic additions that many of them already have.
Okay. And then we're down to
And then
Preliminary.
section 3,
That's
preliminary action.
self-explanatory.
And, this was done before we had electronic
Mhm.
packages
Right, that's
and
what we talked
stuff like
about,
that.
the
So
technology
we
changes.
just need
Right.
to add language about exhibits being available 24/7, as long as there's electricity.
yeah,
Right.
as long as there's a cloud.
In
Section 6.
section 6,
It looks like it's adding a reference that's already there, but it's just consistent.
right, it's in 2B, but it's better to have it not only in that order, but also in the time
Yeah, I
guidelines.
think we-
I think we have it, I think it's in 2 places also in the Board of Appeals
Mhm.
rules.
Right.
Quick question about section 6, Tom, guidelines. Just to split that little hair here is, it says normally will not. So that kind of gives us the option to, if we choose to.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and that's
Okay. That's always been the case.
That's been the practice
Yeah.
of the planning commission.
Right.
If we're, 4 minutes out,
Right, exactly. And we don't have to make a motion to move past 10:30, right?
The
no,
intent there
usually the chair will make an announcement.
Right.
It's been so long since we've
I
been here
know,
that late.
I know.
Usually the chair, in the past, the chair would make an announcement and get a straw
consensus,
poll
yeah,
and consensus from the commission.
Mhm.
Do you feel that we can go on? Should we,
Or is there a
say,
motion to close?
right,
Mhm.
should we
End the
defer?
meeting.
Yeah.
And the
So,
intent of that is to give you that option, but also put the applicants on notice that
Mhm.
that could be an
Right.
issue. Oh, we're coming up to 10:30.
and it's on our, it's on our
It's at the
agenda.
bottom, yeah,
It's on the
yeah, it
agenda
is.
all the
Right.
time, and I'm not finding it right now. Yeah, it's in the second paragraph in the
Right.
box, that the plan, it gives notice there, and having the notice in the rules is
Yeah.
also good.
That's good. So section 8, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're trying to fix here.
These are, again, the explanation may be longer than the actual changes would be.
So
Um,
these are your explanations.
The first part is simply referencing that the guidelines are intended to foster the commission's duty to inquire fully. That's just following general language that appears in most of the, that we do have in most of the commissions. And that's one phrase. It may not be much longer than that.
Okay.
So there's a long explanation there. And it kind of explains it's using similar language in others. But the second part of that is the 26-day deadline, Trudy, and I don't know if you wanted to add any, because we simply said some concern with it, but haven't proposed anything specifically here.
Right, the rules, a lot of people, when they look at these rules, they think that they're guaranteed to be at a meeting in 26 days from their submission. And some of the plans, just looking at the package, we know it's not ready. It's never going to make that deadline and from the time of review. And so we've talked about a few different time periods, but we really need to kind of work it out on the calendar to see how that would work, of extending that 26-day deadline to.
I think, there's a phrase that gets used a lot by the planning director or their designee when we talk about sort of the authority for staff to make a call on something. And I think that belongs here in some form where the application comes in and it's sort of up to you guys to decide if it's ready. It's not so much a time issue, although that's fine as sort of a window of opportunity. But I think the important part there is that you think it's ready, right? In the language that we've used before for those sorts of things.
Accepted.
Well, would it be
Yeah.
appropriate then to say no less than 26 days?
Still keeps the expectation that
It does.
26 days before that it will be, they'll be on the
To
agenda.
me, the
Yeah.
acceptance has to do with
Well,
the quality
you know,
of the.
It might not be.
Right.
Because just if it's a really difficult review,
Yeah.
26 days won't be enough. What we don't want to do is not give a sufficient review by staff for something that's very complicated.
Yeah.
So I agree with John. I think you get some of the accepted language that the county uses, but that tends to be abused by the county, if anybody is listening. But it tends to be not accepted by the county when they're backed up, right? And so it'll just be pushed back and pushed back.
So to me, it's sort of like at a minimum 26 days
Yeah,
before the
right.
calendar, and
That's
to
kind of
the
what you said.
That's what I said.
acceptance
Yeah.
of.
But there's a big and there. Yeah.
Not less
We
than-
should have said not less than or
less than-
at least.
No, it's not, the number's not important. It's like,
Okay.
that's a minimum. But
Okay.
the real important point here, I think, to alleviate staff's
That
concern, is that it's
ready.
submitted in a form acceptable to.
Gives it open.
Oh, so do you feel that there should be something that says and is ready or is
Yeah.
deemed
Yeah.
ready
That's
by?
what I was
Yeah,
saying about.
Yeah.
Accepted by,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the-
Forgetting
Planning
the
director or their
26 days.
designee.
Right, okay.
That's good.
Yep. I love the
Burden
last
of proof.
sentence. I've been, it's something we have to keep reminding people when we're doing this stuff,
Mm.
that the burden of proof is on
Ah.
the applicant, and it's not assumed approved until we find something wrong with it.
Imagine that.
There's not a presumption
Yeah.
it's approved.
But very often, that's the tone of the presentation.
really
or
is,
the-
yeah.
Or the
Can be.
Right.
You should approve
the
this.
applicant. It's like,
Yeah.
what do you mean?
Right, and yeah, sometimes take.
Here's the plan. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for
I
the
wrote
most
it
part, it
down.
may never
What's
be
wrong
an
with
issue, but it's helpful to have it
Oh,
there.
yeah.
So,
No, that's consistent.
Back to there's a sentence in the timing that if the applicant submits something less than 12 calendar days before the hearing, the planning commission may proceed only after granting a waiver. Can we also change that to as recommended by the planning chief?
Mhm.
Because then we don't have to go through the motion of having a motion.
Yep.
Good point.
Yeah, I think you can wrap that whole thing about getting it in time around the quality of the packet, which is
Okay.
deemed by staff.
Mhm.
I don't know how you can probably
we
stack
can
it
work on
differently.
some
Yeah.
wording.
Yeah,
Acceptable.
again, I think most don't reference it as submitted. They reference it as accepted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It has to be
Exactly.
accepted by staff more than 26 days ahead of, or whatever it is.
I believe you're correct. That is, they're the ones I've seen are written in the
Right.
past. Yes.
But it still has to be in a sealed envelope, right? That's one of our rules.
What?
The applications have to be in a sealed envelope or something, didn't
With a wax seal on it.
It's esoteric. If you look back in like section 6 or whatever, not in this marked up one, but in the real section 6.
Really?
It says applicants must be submitted in a sealed envelope or something. It's really funny.
Yeah, and then they apparently, it's like your mission if you choose to accept it.
Thank you, Mr. Phelps.
As it burns up.
Those are the incomplete ones.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, I could have a lot of bonfires.
Okay, C.
See,
I know there was some interest in referencing amendments, and I think that was the staff generated suggestion.
Hey, what does this mean?
Yeah, I don't understand. This is worded weirdly.
Amendments to the application? Is that-
Yeah, I think generally that has not been an issue, so this would probably be looking at, and the original subsection that's already here is the applicant can withdraw. They're looking at probably language not much more extensive than that, simply referencing that amendments are permitted in their application, and the point here was in coordination with staff. In terms of the timing, that may not be, if it's at the hearing, it's going to have to be with the commission's approval to do that. And there's a reference here to correct minor errors. As I say, there may be more of an explanation there than the actual wording that would be needed. But
I think this is for amendments to final site plan? Is
that could be.
Well, yeah, well, it sounds to me like...
Because at some
All you're
point-
saying, it's not amendments, right? It's really just additional information or
Yeah, I'm
small...
gonna have to look at that.
Small minor error corrections to what is already an application, whether it's an amendment or not, whatever it is, right?
Yeah,
That's all you're really saying. Is that
I
right?
don't know if, I'm going to have to look back at this a little bit. I apologize.
I'm not sure I'd call out an allowance for changing
Yeah,
or modifying an application once it's in for a hearing. I mean, in an extraordinary circumstance, an applicant's going to come to you and ask, well, I've got this extra piece, can I bring it? But I wouldn't make it an opportunity to start making modifications and...
I mean, there may be a
Till the last
reason
minute,
not to delve into that. You certainly, there's nothing in here that would prohibit that.
Right.
And
But I wouldn't
typically,
call
in
it
the
out as
midst
something
of the discussion,
I wouldn't call
But
it out as
is
an
it a good reason
opportunity.
for somebody to call into question a decision because there was a spelling corrected on the final report, it wasn't on the posted piece?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And if I might, I think this might be a good place to put, with the planning director's approval, modifications will be accepted at the planning director's approval. And that way, it's just basically, like you
needs
said,
to-
if it does need to happen, we
And it needs an
can.
adjective like minor and,
Yeah.
emphasis on the minor.
emphasis
Yeah.
is on errors, not just on trying
Yeah,
to add something
minor
in.
errors, right, yeah.
I mean, the two examples I can think of are errors.
Yeah.
They've calculated a table wrong.
Right.
The intent was not to show a lower number, just like, oh, I did the math wrong. Here's what the real numbers are. And that's fine. Or they've
Great.
a lot of times
Mhm.
done a rendering kind of at the last minute to sort of clean up something that they had heard from staff or, wanted to make a little
It's
bit
in reaction
more
to
pretty for the...
concerns.
Exactly, make it more pretty. It doesn't
Mhm.
replace or supplant the actual application, it just sort of enhances it a bit.
Right.
And I think that's okay, but I like where you're going, Marty. It's another thing that staff can make the call on to bring forward.
Yeah, I
think you can
agree
put
with,
that in.
I think we should be careful on making that, a given right that they can change things
Right.
once
Right.
they're
I
submitted,
agree.
but I think with proper approvals, there is a time and a place.
I mean, we've had something recently that came before us and they had miscalculated the square footage or something. And, I mean, that's the reason for something like this.
Mhm.
Well,
Not because somebody
you-
wants to make something bigger.
You might remember back when all of a sudden we were doing signs plus the elevations for Fiat all of a
Right,
sudden.
right.
And that was,
Right.
that was done with the planning
Mhm,
commission's
mhm.
permission and done so that, to assist in economic development
Yeah.
for the city.
Exactly.
So, the planning commission's been
Good
reasonable.
cause.
Yeah.
Good. The next section I like, I know we went through one of those appeals, and it
Yes.
was kind of based on, we borrowed the process, so it's good to get that codified,
Yeah,
I think you're
that's
right.
nice.
Especially since we're passing a lot of the minor things to staff now.
Mhm.
We've got 2 or 3 examples where we've moved some of the decision-making to staff, so I think that's fair.
I think the next one is like the last paragraph in section 10.
Yep.
But actually, it's adding just a little bit to the single paragraph there. This also just carries over some fairly basic rules that commissions follow. Any decisions got to be by a majority of the members present, by motion, etc. Very simple language. It's what you follow anyway.
Frank, are there any provisions, though, that you've seen that allow for dissenting opinions? And would that be, not necessarily, would that be in section 10, or is that someplace else in rules of procedures, perhaps? mean,
I have not, that would be the kind of thing that if it's not prohibited, that it would be allowed if there was, if a member felt strongly about wanting to insert
Because
their
we've had,
opinion and laying
from
it
time
out.
to time here, we've
There's no
had some
prohibition on
dissent,
this.
believe it or not, there's been some dissenting
That can
opinions.
happen.
When- and- Especially, well, I mean,
Well, it's not like
usually
you're
that's
tested
when it's
from it.
related and we have a very formal written decision.
Right.
Right now, the normal procedure is for the planning commission to make a motion, and then we prepare a site development approval, which says, on the back, has language saying that this plan was adopted in accordance with section 24-170, and that's why we always have you put that in the motion. If it's something that's more contentious, shall we say, we generally have a written opinion, and we have from time to time had dissenting. or-
Well, that's what I would call it, dissenting opinion. But I mean, it does
Opinions.
reflect, it is reflected in the discussion in the minutes from time to time,
Right.
but it's not
Sure.
formal.
Right.
Right.
Whereas if you're going to put it in rules and regulations or processes, maybe that would be a place to put that. If there is a dissenting opinion that it is, made public, or that it can be amended in the decision, to the decision. I don't know if that's proper.
We can reference it, that could be part of it. As I say, if the rules don't prohibit it anyway,
Mhm.
then it certainly could be. If a member wishes to prepare something to add to
Yep.
an approval,
Which has always been the case.
Yeah, I don't know that it would be part
Sure.
of
Yeah.
any dissenting opinions or additional information or, expansion of whatever the discussion was that's then handed over to mayor and council or the public in general. I would just hope that it was on the public record. It just wasn't part of the official vote of the commission, right? So.
Are you
so-
talking more for recommendations?
Well, the
or-
letter. if the letter-
Recommendations as well as the vote itself. The vote itself.
Okay.
If the vote is contentious enough and that there's reason enough to believe, so if it does go to the Court of Appeals later on for whatever reason, that was duly noted and that is evidence with
can
at final hearing.
now, as you point out, it would be part of the record anyway.
Right.
And that's what I did
But
into.
certainly.
Okay.
And I might just add that, really, with a core part of our purpose as the planning commission is to give those recommendations to the city council. I would be, I don't know if careful is the right word, but we really would need to be really mindful about giving a mixed signal to council of saying, hey, here's this, but here's the dissenting opinion. That should be reflected in the record, as has been said, and I don't know that outlining a more formal
I'm
process
concerned
than
about
that.
what you just said. I'm not even a second's concerned about what you just said. I'm not concerned about sending them a mixed message at all. We have a majority vote, which says the majority of the
Right.
commission has voted a certain way and then agrees to a certain letter or whatever the
Right.
continuing information is. But more information is not a bad thing for mayor and council at any point ever.
Exactly.
So any testimony from any of their expert commissioners would certainly
Sure.
is something we should all be encouraged to
Yeah,
get.
my point is
outside.
adding in a formalized process of having a dissenting when, as has been mentioned, that should be in the minutes,
the
in the
official
record.
vote, yeah. I think
It
that's
should have
what
been
we're
something
doing.
Just
that's happening.
point.
And I think what we've seen in some of the other Board of Appeals and some of the other decisions that have been made, we would have to then make sure that any information that was being put forward in that dissenting opinion or dissenting thing actually was information that was on the record. I think that's, that
Yeah, I do
allows an
agree.
opportunity for things to creep in that may be someone's opinion that wasn't expressed in the
Well, and I
meeting
think,
itself.
and I think at a fundamental level, this is about what constitutes an approval. That's all it is. And
Yeah.
it's either going to be by voice or by written,
Delineation.
whatever.
Resolution.
Resolution. It's really not about any other machinations of legal precedents or anything else. It's just that, how we're going to approve that application.
Right.
Right? And it's just, it's
By
either approved or it's
majority
not.
vote, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it may be in writing or it may be by voice, and either
Right.
one is
That's fine.
strong enough.
Just wanted to point.
Now, there's a dissenting opinion on this particular recommendation.
We will nobody know that.
I'll write it up tomorrow.
Do a little footnote there.
But to that point, is there ever a need for us to do like a poll to say who did what and have that as a part of the record?
What do you-
Like
What the vote
poll
was?
each vote, you poll each commissioner for their vote.
Well, I mean, we have it on
Vote would be part of it, right?
all our votes tell who
Yeah, who decided?
voted
Yeah.
and if somebody abstained or voted
But it
no.
doesn't say
It's-
who voted which way, that's what
Yes,
I'm
it does.
saying.
Yeah, it does.
Does it?
Yes.
Our votes are so often majorities, you probably haven't seen it in
I haven't
in
seen it,
months.
granted, yeah, but
Yeah.
you know what, I haven't.
Yeah.
So next time, vote
There've been a
no.
few.
It's been a few.
So, but no, it's
It's
been
been a
there
while.
in the minutes.
That's right.
I'll have to go back and.
I think it's been like 2 no's. For 10 years.
You
2
and me,
years.
right?
Yeah, probably the 2 of us.
No, but even when you abstain, we say who
Well,
abstained
right.
too.
Okay.
So we're
And keep in
Miriam
mind
does a
that
great job on that.
the video is, you know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is.
It's always
Right,
right.
right.
It's all there to see.
All right, let's keep rolling.
The, page 9, after talking about reconsideration, just a very brief section referencing that appeals can be taken and just follow the rules that are already in place for that. Again, that's a pretty brief one.
That's fine.
And at the end of that page is talking about, or suggesting another section on communications. That's following somewhat what Board of Appeals has, underscoring not only the ex parte thing, but also pointing out that private communications from city staff and the city attorney are not considered ex parte. It's not a bad thing for the rules to specify that. And then also to lay out member site visits, which I think Matt had mentioned before, that as long as it's reported, it's entirely permitted.
Good.
And I think the last thing was,
Well, to clarify that last sentence too.
Yes, sorry.
Is the intent there that when there's a quorum that attends a site visit? Like it kind of reads.
those were intended to be individual.
Yeah.
Oh, they were, okay.
Yeah.
That came up years and years ago with HPAC, actually.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
big
we
issue
did that,
because we were
right.
going out in the
Yep.
field all
Yeah.
the time, and they wanted to be very clear that we weren't talking to the
Right.
homeowner ahead of time and,
This becomes a
representing.
little burdensome.
And we
It's a
weren't
small
talking amongst
town,
ourselves.
frankly.
Yes.
It's going to be a rare, the last 10 years of me being on this commission,
Well-
every single application I've been at site.
Right.
Well, no,
At
what
some
it-
point before
What it
that.
means is you simply say that you went to the site and you didn't have any communication with the owner about it.
But I'm just saying that this becomes just a little bit odd.
Well, the intent
because
of that
every
is,
single application
if it's
from
to
now
be-
on, I got to say that, right?
not necessarily, if you want it to be part of the record,
Right.
if it's part of your decision that I went there, then it's important, because otherwise it's not in the record. Now, if you don't mention it, if you went out there and don't say anything about that, it's not going to be part
This
of
is
the
a
record.
small town. I've been there. I was out there.
I very much understand.
application you're talking about? or
Yeah,
just in
probably.
general?
Yeah. I know, the time of application, it's a small town. Yeah.
People are
No,
watching.
but I mean, I guess my question is, you went specifically out to the site to review whatever was being presented in that application? Or are you just saying you just happened to be there and then there was an application? and-
Right. I think that's a difference. It's not, that subtlety is not in here. You know,
We could
I don't know how you.
specify that member site visits related to the application or what have you. But
Right.
again, that's really specifying that if it's part of the record, if there was something that was there that needs to be added, that needs,
Right, and that
So that
usually
when we
is
have
an observation or
a
piece of
review-
information.
I
that
actually,
we bring to the
was
commission.
reading this differently, because I thought we were going with this, and this is what I thought it was saying. This is getting into ex parte communication, okay, can't do that, we
Right.
get that. But by the way, it's okay to go visit the site, because you're
oh,
trying
it's
to
also
prepare for
saying, it can do both, yes.
That's what I thought the point of this was, so that you didn't, we didn't adopt a language about ex parte and all that, and then make it sound like you couldn't engage
Sure.
the application
Right.
before the actual hearing.
Yeah.
And we obviously don't want that.
No,
right? So
it's great, a good clarification, but then there's a parentheses.
It means both.
It means both, okay.
It's doing both.
But the parentheses, the thing in parentheses is just odd to me.
All right. What's next?
Just 14.
Okay.
And that again, I'm not sure, I guess it's saying we might be able to consolidate 14 because we already referenced this earlier on. And then just a section that does reference Open Meetings Act requirements, which is processes to close, et cetera, which is fairly basic, a couple of paragraphs, and that has been added to most of the templates already. So.
Okay.
That's good.
Nothing wrong with that.
Again, these are not, really not changing the thrust at all. These are just updates to what's already a fairly workable set of rules.
Okay, any other concerns?
That's great.
Did any commissioners have any issues, general or specific, on updates? No?
I'm sorry, can we go back to rules and procedures for a second? There was a section 4 there on alternate chair and vice chair. If neither are present, then there's something about seniority, I believe, by seniority.
Oh, if they're not there.
If they're not there, if the chairman and the vice chairman are not present in a meeting, for some reason or another, whatever it may be,
Right.
then the next person in line would be
They're having
based on
expert
seniority.
communication somewhere.
I don't think we've run into it, too. We've actually run
We
into
We
it.
have,
Yeah,
that's
we
why
have.
I was concerned, I needed some definitions to what seniority meant.
It can happen.
If you could do that, or what?
What sec?
Oh,
yeah,
it's
please.
Section
up
4
here?
in the rules of procedure. Yeah, right, thanks a lot, guys.
Is it
Right here.
It's
I
section
believe
7.
I had section 4 in the rules of procedure, let me see. what it
Yeah.
is.
So if the way the math works, if we were to just have, could we have a third, this is just an idea, I'm not
An
recommending,
alternate?
just have a third level, call it secretary or something, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Okay.
To
Most
default to
planning-
if there are those quorum issues where you lose, I mean, because the math works, you still have a quorum,
Yep.
but you're down to like your last three, right?
Mhm.
4 potentially, but.
It's going to cost us another $10.50 a year in placards.
Alternate vice chair.
Most planning commissions have as their secretary the planning director, just automatically.
Yeah.
If they designate anybody, because that's kind of representing that staff, provide a lot of the day-to-day
just pulled
work
that
behind
title
the
Well,
and
it's
I'm-
scenes.
interesting because when I first started here, there was the chair and the secretary, and that's the officers of the planning commission.
And that was not the planning director, but that was...
It was a actual, and it was probably because in the 60s, the secretary actually took the minutes of the meetings. So, but for the plats, I mean, it was in our subdivision rules and also in the...
There are some weird titles out there. When you look at, like, Fairfax County has a couple of weird titles on their
Oh, yeah.
commission. And who else was
Is Pooh Bah one of them? Or?
It's, when you look at those guys, you wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, I think some concept such as the ranking member or something
Yeah.
like that,
Or alternate
senior
to be
member or
designated by the
something.
chair in advance, or something like that.
And I think we could either define that, as you mentioned.
I would just
like-
come up with a technical way to do it so that if it ever happens that we're down the two chair or vice chair, that you don't have to really scramble and worry about it. You know, it's just whoever.
Paper, rock, scissors, one.
What's that? Yeah. Draw straws.
The first one in.
And it's section 7, subtask, subline 1, application. It's the application, complaint and petition or request for a hearing shall be returned in a sealed envelope to designated staff liaison.
Wait, 7 where?
7.1, application. How cool is that?
Wait.
Okay.
What are you looking
This is section 4 from the chairperson.
at? That's the
Mhm.
model rules.
Right, model. Oh, these
This
are
is the
models.
model.
These are not our, but these are our model rules. Okay.
Not our, this is for the city.
So
The
he
city
was looking at
attorney's
a different
office
set,
did.
because I've been
Oh,
looking
okay.
for those.
That's not our rule.
I got you.
It's
Okay.
like, am I missing that all this week?
All the approvals are void.
This was the, under the Senate Rules and Procedure
Okay.
Commission.
Anything else you guys want to hit on the procedure stuff?
Yeah.
Procedural?
Please enter your
No?
Voicemail.
Any other concerns?
No,
Marty, Frank, Judy?
I read it. That's it.
Mary, what do you think? We're on the right track?
You said you better read it.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, Trudy, Frank.
Oh, thank
for
you.
pulling that together. I guess
Thank you.
what's the next step? You're going to,
I think we'll start looking at some, I won't use the word legalese, but we'll look at
Thank
some
you.
actual language
Okay.
and wording, and perhaps get you a draft, maybe for first review in the next couple of months.
charts and graphs?
We'll see about that.
How do you
left already.
calculate the ranking member?
We like thick.
All right. That takes us then to, from the commission, Danny, can I start with you tonight, please?
I have nothing. Just be safe in this cold, crazy, icy weather.
Good point. You too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lloyd?
Once again, kudos to the city staff for clearing out the snow as quickly and as efficiently as they normally do. And the preparation and anticipation of these storms has been fantastic. I mean, you see the trucks going out, 24 hours in advance and laying down that beet juice or whatever that stuff is. And it's been very effective, and I think it's really contributed to making this a much safer community, and I really applaud the staff for the job that they do and for coordinating it so well.
Excellent. I agree. Matt, anything tonight?
And I'll send an email to Ollie as well, but if planning staff could take the 1,000th look at the pedestrian crossing at the tracks here in Old Town. The light, the trigger light for crossing for pedestrians is very, very quick, and I think it's off a little bit. I think there's a little bit of danger there of trapping across the tracks. Something else. I think it's worth another look, and particularly as development is still challenged and still hopefully coming along at some point for both sides of that intersection. It just becomes more and more important for us to get that intersection right, particularly before the next 200 units come in or so. It's still not quite right.
Good point. All right, Joe?
No, I'm good tonight.
Okay, thanks. Trudy, anything?
Just our next planning commission meeting is scheduled to be March 4th. And then the next one would be March 18th. And then we have a joint work session on our telecommunications ordinance that's in the zoning ordinance. There's a number of new regulations coming down the road from the FCC about how fast we turn over applications, and also kind of new technology as far as the small cell antennas, which are smaller and can be put on light poles, and just kind of the new regulations that we must submit to.
Okay.
And what day?
That is on Monday, March the 23rd.
Thank you.
Yes, that's been pulled.
Secretary Marty, anything from
New title?
Yeah.
Oh, sounds good. Frank, anything else?
And you've heard from me already.
Okay, cool.
We're fine.
Have a good evening, everybody. We're adjourned.